I guess we'll have the mayor call the meeting to order.
Okay, so we're gonna call to order the February 20th Finance Committee. Got this. And the first thing we're going to do, John Noah's gonna put that agenda up on the screen. And we're gonna talk about the schedule expectation. Noah's gonna talk about schedule expectation. And then you guys need to select a chair for this committee.
Yeah, so thank you, Mayor. So since this is our first meeting, there's a couple kind of logistical housekeeping items I think we want to go over. Spend a couple minutes talking about our committee now, how you guys like to conduct business, expectations, and there'll be some procedural plans for later. And then we need to elect a chair. And it's been a long time since we've actually elected a chair, so I don't have a specific process by which to do that. I don't know if the mayor has a recommendation.
Well, normally the committee members make the recommendation and really, you know, the finance committee, Noah's gonna run through a bunch of reports and detail. And the finance committee historically, when directors want, we help us develop the budget, which is gonna be later on this fall. But once the budget's adopted, this is the committee where, when Dennis or Nick has a great idea and it needs funding and the council agrees that it needs funding, we're gonna talk about those ideas here first before they go to the full council. We're gonna review the financial statements, but when it comes to our budget and our funding, the budget's adopted for a 2-year period with a mid-year review where we typically have been able to add additional expenditures to. But property tax comes in as we're budgeted. Water, sewer, stormwater revenue comes in as budgeted because we've got rates for it. The real, there's the sales tax report that the NOAA reviews and the REIT revenue report. Those are the two wild cards. Sales tax can vary, and that's what we really need to watch closely. And then REIT revenue, which is restricted dollars that we can use for capital dollars. They can vary significantly also. So that's, from Mike's time on the finance committee and as the mayor, the report I look at the most is the sales tax report and what the trends are with that. Whether we need to pump the brakes on some expenditures that we've planned, or things are going really good and we can consider additional expenditures that may come along. So that's just kind of my thoughts, and I wanted to share. Mark, go ahead.
I know we have years worth of historical data. In several industries, you have sales trends. I'm sure our sales tax trend the same way year after year after year. They may be higher this year than last year, or lower this year than last year, but the trends throughout the year are relatively the same.
For somewhat sales tax, though, when we budget, we use a 5-year average, okay, which is very conservative. And you'll see when we talk this evening, and it started about last August. For 6 years, we had record revenue every month after month for about a 6-year period, and that stopped last August. And so now when you look at the year-over-year number, it's flat or it's slightly negative. But because we're so conservative on our budgeting approach, we haven't had a month, I don't believe, where we haven't hit budget. Which is, that's when we got a problem. When we don't meet budget, what are we not going to spend money on? Because that's not getting the revenue you plan for. Then you've got to, how are we going to control expenses? Does that answer your question?
Yeah, essentially.
I did want to point out that at the bottom of the agenda, we have a definition which we've used for years as far as kind of the role of the finance committee. So I think, we always refer to this when we talk about what is our role in the city, what are we doing, budgeting, financial planning, financial reporting, looking at long-range goals and strategies. So I guess I just want to point that out. Will always be at the bottom of your agenda. If you could ever say, hey, what is our role, you know, as we talk over time. So I'm just gonna come back up top here. Again, not sure how to go about this, but I just wanted to give you three an opportunity to discuss. If anyone has interest in chairing the committee, what that looks like is generally you are responsible for starting the meeting. We kind of making sure that everyone what's heard and has their questions, and then concluding the meeting. So it's pretty straightforward. Staff usually develop the agenda, and of course, if any of the finance committee members want to see something on the agenda, I guess that's where I look at expectations. Kind of, is there anything in the future you'd like to see us bring to you or talk about, or something you have an interest in? And then we'll put that in the work plan and find a way to get that in. So again, I just want to turn it over to you guys to discuss, see if anyone has an interest in being the committee chair, as you're all fairly new to the finance committee.
Are we all fairly new or all actually new?
We're all new to
All
the
of you,
committee.
all of you are new.
I thought so. Okay, just making sure.
So Mark or John, John, do you want to chair?
I don't mind doing it.
Yeah, I don't mind either. So whoever wants it can have it.
Or I could be the deciding vote, huh?
Rock, paper, scissors.
Yeah, if Mark wants it, I would love for him to take it. He's a senior member here. He can have it.
Sounds like it's Mark then.
Okay.
And then this is we've moved the meeting time by 30 minutes, but this is when historically it's the evening of our work study, when we have a work study. And we're gonna have one in March. We're just not gonna have one, we're having one in March.
But not tonight.
But not tonight.
Yeah. Yeah, and John, I didn't realize it was in person because I thought it was a Zoom. And the only thing I would point out is that for me to come here at 4:30 and leave at 5:30 and come back at 6:30, I can do it. It would be a little easier for me if we could start at 4, but does that fit your schedule? I mean.
Absolutely. And normally when I'm in, if we were having a meeting afterwards, I would for sure be in person. I was with you. I thought it was Zoom, so I took the opportunity to start my weekend early.
No worries.
4 o'clock's fine with
So
me.
4 o'clock. Yeah,
Either
4
way,
o'clock's
it's fine.
good.
If that's okay.
Going forward,
Okay.
4 o'clock then at
Okay.
this time, which I'm fine with too.
Great. Thank you.
And then I guess I'll just ask the question, you guys have a preference to be an in-person or Zoom? Again, we always do Zoom because we record the meetings for the public, right? So we always will be Zooming.
I think my preference would be just as I stated, right? If we were going to have a work study, I'll be in person, but if not, I would prefer a Zoom.
I think it's always available to you to do Zoom regardless. We tend to go over reports and sometimes there's a little bit of paper to it. And, it's your, however you get information, we're gonna email it out to you. You've got a device if you wanna look at it that way. Noah and I will be here because we're typically preparing for the meeting,
So typically, what are the length of these meetings?
an hour.
So we've always tried to hold it to an hour, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Except for during budget season, you'll see we'll actually plan for at least 2 hours.
Yeah, and we'll have more meeting than a monthly meeting when it gets into budget season also.
Yeah.
More likely I'll be in person.
I don't know if I'll be in person or Zoom. I like both. I do like getting printouts, so I may come to the meeting if they're real printouts.
Okay.
We're not gonna print a lot of paper, but a few pieces, particularly the sales tax, because the print's small.
Okay, so I think we talked about some stuff, third Tuesday a month, 4 o'clock.
I have a quick question about this sheet you gave us,
Yeah, and
Nora.
we're gonna come right to that.
Oh,
Just one
okay.
more second. Zoom or in person, we'll kind of play it by ear for each person
Okay.
and schedule and what we have going on after the meeting. And then Mark Trenaro will be our new committee chair.
And so when we get to this summer, so we're typically in this room, but when we get to this summer and they're down on the second floor, the contractor's moving up to this floor, so. The council very likely could be meeting for a few meetings on Zoom because we won't have a council chambers. And we probably won't have this conference room either, so we'll likely be forced this summer to have a finance committee meeting or two via Zoom because we just won't have a meeting space.
Okay, so I'm gonna walk through the first three reports, which we generally cover. And then we'll go into some presentations after that. So the first one is the sales tax report. Brad, I think you had a question on that.
I assumed you weren't going to talk about it, so, but if you're going
Oh,
to
yeah,
present it, that's great.
yeah. Get back up here. Zoom around here. And I will say, I apologize for getting you guys the material late. I try to get the material out by Thursday, Friday. This just was a lot of different presentations, a lot of different data to pull together, and I just didn't want to push out half of the material and then come back with the other half. So this is our sales tax report, as the mayor was talking about earlier. Again, this is a very important source of revenue for the general fund and the city as a whole. And so I'm just going to orient you with the report itself. In this first column, we have our 2022 numbers. These are all actuals. In the next column over, we have our 2023 actuals. You can see we have a 23 budget as well as actuals. And you can see for 2023, we were positive by about $854,000 in sales tax revenue. So it's very good. The next column over, we have our 24 budget and our year-to-date or actuals so far.
And is that through today or is that through January 31st?
Yeah, so we generally get the sales tax report about the 15th, 16th of each month for the previous month. So this is reflecting January's revenues that we received, and we don't record them until about the 15th. And so that's why these reports are always kind of at the time sensitive to get right to the finance committee meeting a couple days later.
And it's important to note too, this is the sales tax that was collected 60 days prior to that. So the state sits on it for 60 days, then remits it to us. And so we're looking at
November?
So we're 3 months.
3 months behind when we're looking at this.
So it could go up for next month then, if it's December?
Well, but
So what we've done here in the table, all the data is comparable. So even though the revenue is lagging, all the historical revenue is also lagged as well.
you'll see there, February, which was December, does typically tick up from January. So we should see a tick up from this number, but will it be as high as the 684? The trend we've been seeing since August is no. See, we're 25,000 year over year or 3.9% negative. But the more important column is covered by Nick Bond's face. Is and that is the budget to budget, we were $115,000 basically, or 22% overperforming to budget. Because we're over, because of a 5-year average.
That was my question, to know. So we're expecting like 6.9 for the year, or that column stumbles over, okay.
Yeah, so that's correct.
Okay.
We budgeted and are reliant upon the $6.9 million to fund
Okay.
our activities this year. And so again, that's the philosophy is okay, as long as we're conservative, even as revenue is slowing or flatlining, as long as it's compared to budget, we continue to fund what we've already budgeted. Now, if we're to add additional expenditures, that's where you kind of pause and go, let's kind of wait this out a little bit and see how this plays out.
And I like the over under column on the right where it just says value, because obviously we haven't received anything.
Right.
And could we do that for the third column up on the left where it's bold red? Because that makes it look like we're in the red, and I don't think we really are.
We are in the,
Well,
we are in the
we
red.
are based on.
We are, but it's only February. I mean, or could it at least be italicized or something? Because it just seems so, to me, it looks more official.
It carries to the bottom. That's the number.
Yeah, but
And then as we get more months in here, you'll have an annualized number here. So you're gonna manage this bottom line.
it's just that I like it pointing out that we don't have the figures like for the whole year, so
Yeah, and in January, it's always, it always kind of looks like that in January, and then once you get February and March, you
you
can
get
see.
used to it.
Yeah, you just see it. You can
Okay.
see where the months aren't being calculated because the other months are there. So the presentation and representation is clear, but this is always true in January. It's like, well, this looks weird a little bit, but just give it a month or two If this still looks funny, we can talk about reformatting to make it look clearer, I guess. So overall, not the greatest start, as year-over-year growth is below 4%. But again, when we compare it to the budget, still ahead of our budget, so we're still fine moving forward.
I'm jumping way ahead here, but I'm just gonna ask this question now. We do a biennial budget. Do we do any update mid-year,
Yes.
1 year in?
We trued up, at the mid-year review, we trued up our revenue and recognized
And we did that in December, right, Mayor?
November, yeah.
November. Okay, I remember it being, okay, perfect. I couldn't remember if that was for sure. Thank you.
Yes, we did.
Although I will say, when we did the mid-biennial review in 2023, the finance committee and this council's recommendation was to only touch the 2023 sales tax budget figure. So you can look here at the top, they're almost flat, these two. We didn't touch 2024 sales tax. So when we proposed additional spending, we said, we can see we're gonna capture more revenue here. Let's capture that now, and if we have a little more extra, great, but let's not touch 2024. Again, it's a more conservative approach to saying, hey, we really think we need to adjust our 24 as well. But at the time, again, as long as we are meeting our funding needs, there was really no driver to increasing the revenue.
One last question, are the funding needs based on the 2024 estimates?
Yes,
Okay, good.
that's our budget. And John, to answer your question, we overperformed by $850,000 last year to budget, to actual. And then when we did the budget process, we recognized and brought that $850,000 into, and that's how we paid for the things that got added at the mid-year review largely. That makes sense?
Okay.
So no, mid-year review, actual mid-year or 2 months?
It's actually a mid-biennial review.
Yeah.
So it's the center point of our biennial budgets. We won't do another one until 2025 is when we'll have our next mid-biennial review. Because our next budget is going to be for the 25-26 budget, and that's what we're doing this summer and fall.
That's a more accurate statement, a mid-biennial review versus.
Yeah, mid-year sounds like it would happen in summer.
Yeah. So then further down this chart, again, another important revenue source for us is real estate excise tax. What can I say? So this one's also
Just real estate sales, that's.
So we don't do a 5-year average on this one?
no, we don't.
Yes, we do. For the budget over here.
Well, for establishing what the budget would be on a monthly basis, we use
Okay.
5-year history.
Okay.
But to actually create the total budget, so the 1.6 million for 2024, it's more driven by our capital program and our capital needs and what cash we think we have available. Traditionally, we've again been pretty conservative in our REIT budgets. We start with $800,000 per fiscal year. You can see that they're both 1.8, 1.6, because again, in the mid-year review, we said we needed more REIT revenues to fund the needs requested. And the council felt comfortable doing that. You can see we had a surplus of 312 for 2023. So that's good and fine. And then we're starting off our biennium here. So right now you say, okay, where does this mean? Well, we're ahead of our actuals for 2023 by 32%, but again, driven by real estate sales. So that's, take what it is. But we're also ahead of budget too. So those are two positive indicators for REIT now for 1 month. Again, this is just be one of those things that we're just going to watch each month and each period as the year progresses.
So this is the report we'll typically dive in deep to every finance committee meeting, and Noah's gonna go over another report that you guys, the full council gets every month, and we don't typically dive into that deep, but he just wants to make sure you guys have a good foundation and understanding of the report as you get it in your email.
Yeah. So this next page, is looking at our cash and investments fund balance by fund. Again, we usually briefly go over this. There hasn't been a whole lot to talk about every month on this report, other than it's all positive. We have healthy fund balances. We're managing appropriately. So when in the past, when there was a concern, I would bring that to the attention of the finance committee and say, hey, this fund balance is getting a little bit low. Here's what's going on. Or for the capital funds, I would say, hey, we expect this fund balance to decrease as we get into the summer season and start spending our fund balances on these capital projects. So that's all fine and normal, and you'll expect to see that for our 302, 304 construction funds. Okay. But again, this is just a quick look that, you know, we want to provide you to show that the funds are healthy. And if there is a particular fund we'd like to talk about, then we will focus on that. The next report is the monthly budget status update that I send out monthly. Again, I would like your guys' feedback if this is working for you. Here's a cover sheet that kind of explains and lays out what it's for. So we can spend a couple minutes to go into this briefly. I'm just trying to make sure I'm keeping on with our time on the agenda. On this first page, we point out our current expense fund, which is our 001 fund, which is the main operating fund of the city. And again, we are trying to look at our revenues in particular. How are we performing? Any concerns, those type of things, and where are we at, you know, as we progress each month. We highlight here the property tax, sales tax, and other taxes, and just give you some metrics to how it's performing against its current 2024 budget. You'll see there is an original column here. Again, this is what was originally budgeted, and then we do budget amendments throughout our period. So sometimes the revenues are adjusted. You can see that this was roughly about $200,000 in adjustments.
We commonly refer to this as our general fund.
Yes. Yep. Good point. And so I'll always have a little, it's blocking out, a little comment here, kind of where we're at in relation to the budget. 11% of revenues were received for our first month. So you'll get the hang of the percentages as we get to quarters and half the year. You know, if we're sitting at 40% of revenues halfway through the year, we'll start to have conversations about why that is. You got things that influence that, like property tax, which come in April and October. So that will influence the timing of our revenues, and then sales tax. So those will be the two big ones that we're monitoring. Again, we'll just make little comments here, whether we're on track or we're under budget. Again, just like to show sales tax data differently. So you can see this on the monthlies of how we performed 22, 23, 24. Similarly, here's our 24 budget. Again, just another way to illustrate kind of where we're at. You can say we're above budget. The blue's above the red. We're above. So that's all good. We then on this section of the report try to highlight our restricted funds. And those are our impact fees and our REIT funds. And so we're going to talk more and more about that in this later presentation, but also throughout the year quite a bit. In here, again, you'll see we have our beginning biennial budget fund balance, our total revenues received by each of these funds, and then what we have budgeted for the biennium. And then we have this fourth row here, we have obligated expenses. And what the obligated expenses are, they are expenses which we've discussed. They are not budgeted by the council, but they are committed towards projects that were already underway. And as we collect more money and we know there's a funding needed in the future, we start to obligate those funds for that project in the future. You'll see there's a lot of obligations in the transportation side as we're obligating funds for Bethel and all the other projects that we will have in our 25 and 26 budget. But we're not going to do that work now, but we will need the funding in 25, 26. We start to obligate it. And the whole purpose of that is so we know that we're going to have fully funded projects by the time we get there, and that we don't spend the money twice. Okay, because if I did not obligate that funds for those projects, the council would say, well, shoot, it looks like we have, you know, $4 or $5 million just sitting there. And the truth is we have plans for that money to complete these transportation projects that we won't need the funding for until we're in the construction phase in 25 and 26.
And so within that transportation fund, Nick or Noah, does that include our $110? Is that what it is?
No, I don't include those. So we can go into that.
Okay.
This is just the impact fees.
Just impact. So
Yep. And so again, I think we're going to keep building on a foundation here in the finance committee. Next time we could talk about and show all these obligated expenses, and you guys are really familiar with what those are. But I think today's goal was to get basic foundation on reporting, community structure, and then transportation. Again, we highlight how much revenue received in park impact fees, transportation, and school. And again, the school district impact fees, we receive them in, but then the next month remit them directly to the school district, so that's passed through. We're gonna beef up, I would hope, that would be a goal of mine, to beef up our capital conversation in the report as we kind of get into the capital season. We can talk more about what's going on with projects. And Chris Hammer does a great job of doing some summary stuff. So I'm gonna work with him to kind of get better summary on the capital side that we could share with council. Again, further down, you'll have a summary on your enterprise fund, your water, to show, you know, how the revenues are performing, how the expenses are performing, just in general, how the enterprise fund is performing on your water, sewer, and storm. So I got 3 fields here, one for water, again, sewer, same format, and then one for storm. So take some time, read those over, see if that's useful, or if you would like something more. And the whole purpose of those 4 or 5 pages is to essentially summarize all the detail of the monthly budget. So we provide it, so you have it, and you can take your time and dig through it and ask any questions you want with it. Happy to answer it. So I'll kind of briefly run through this. Again, at the top here, we have our current expense fund, Fund 001, our main fund for the city, total revenues, what the current budget is, period activity, and then kind of amount, a percentage remaining to be collected. So it's about 80% still to be collected of our revenues. You'll see on the expenditure side, again, this is operational expenses by department. You see your finance department, court, law enforcement, community development, public works, admin, and our respective budgets, our expected fiscal activity, and then the variance, or how much budget authority each of our departments have remaining for the fiscal year. Again, at the beginning of the fiscal year, these are going to be high percentages because we're going to spend it throughout the year. And what we watch for, at least in the finance department, as we get towards the end of the year, are these spending percentages a reasonable level, right? There's a quarter of the year left. We would expect it to be about that 30 to 25% range of authority. Now, if we find the department's like 10%, we're midway through the year, we'll flag it and go, okay, what's going on here? Is there a GL coding problem? Is there a contract we did not plan for, didn't know about, that needs a budget amendment? So that's how we'll kind of flag those things to identify and have the conversation. But right now, as you're looking through here, you say, yeah, this seems reasonable. Got a long ways to go in this first fiscal year. And so this is the same.
Noah,
Oh, go ahead, John.
what's miscellaneous?
In this case, miscellaneous is generally transfers. So it's generally money we transfer from the general fund to our capital fund or our debt service funds. And so I can break that down for you, John, and get you the full detail breakdown for that. That's
I was just curious. Yeah.
That's a good question, because I was wondering why there was 2 million for miscellaneous.
She doesn't fit in any of the other buckets.
well, and it's also a way for us to we call it Department 6. So it's the miscellaneous department, but for transfers, it's easier to track that if it's all lumped into one department. So we know where all the transfer codes are at. It's not spread amongst all the departments, kind of lost in the minutia. It actually means something then, especially when we have to make these transfers monthly, quarterly, or once a year. So you'll see this report does this for each of our funds. You'll have the street fund, again, another important fund because it's our street operations maintenance fund. We budget 1.83 million. We received $132,000 so far, and that's primarily property taxes. And so we'll come back to that a little bit. So still 90% to go. Public Works is generally the only department out of the street fund because they're doing public works for streets, they're paving, lighting, striping, all the activities that they do. So they're generally the only department that hits that fund. Stabilization fund, again, this is one of our emergency reserve funds. You'll see there's really no budget there unless we get to mid-year review or the new biennial budget. And when we do our recalculation of what that target should be, we may need to contribute more funding to that. But that's really meant to be an emergency reserve fund that we only tap in the event of emergencies. So we monitor that to make sure that we're still hitting our targets, and as long as we are, we don't need to make additional contributions from the general fund. You'll see there will be revenue recorded there because we do earn interest in that fund. So that's part of the benefit, and it helps to offset against future contributions, is it earning its own interest. This is an important fund here, and we're gonna talk about it shortly, is the Criminal Justice Fund. That money is restricted for law enforcement only, so that's the only department you see come out of there. Again, we use that money primarily for police vehicle purchases, their software system and equipment. That's generally what we target for that.
And another question, as I'm hearing you walk through this. So this report sounds like our income statement, but it does not give us the balance of those funds.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, and if you would prefer a different way, John, I could work on different reporting styles.
No, I just needed to make sure I was orienting myself correctly. This would be like a private sector income statement, which is separate from the balance sheet. So it makes sense now.
Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah, especially when you combine this with the cash and investment report above.
Yep.
You're kind of building that income statement for you.
Yeah. That had to make sense on why it was $0 in the stabilization, but I get it now. This is just the tracking of the in and out.
Yeah. So I'm gonna scroll down to, I guess, are there any specific funds you want, or you want me to keep going through each fund, or?
I'm fine.
I like the walkthrough you're doing,
Okay.
if we have time for that.
Okay. I'm just trying to be mindful of the time because I want to get to the transportation presentations. Our community events fund 107, again, that's our LTAC dollars to sponsor events. I think you guys are very familiar with that fund and establishing those budgets. Paths and Trails, this is kind of an odd fund. I think I will look to close it this year. I got to look at the statute to see if it's required, but it receives a small fraction of our property tax. It's like 0.0002. So you can see we never really budget much money for this in the Paths and Trails, and there's not a healthy, there's not a big fund balance because there's not much to use it for as far as maintaining paths and trails. So I would like to spend what we have in that fund and actually close that fund because it's just more administrative work to move. You can see for the month, we collected $169. So every month we're collecting about $170. Small fund just doesn't have to get in debt. Now the REIT fund is important. Again, we talked about that before, the real estate excise tax fund. And we'll cover a little bit more REIT here in a little bit, so I'll hold off on that, as well as our impact fee fund. This usually has healthy balances as we're collecting impact fees and again, using those dollars all for capital projects. We have a big capital project program, as you guys are aware of. So that's a very important fund for us to track, and Nick monitors that as well as I do. Our bond redemption fund. So this fund we use to make our debt service payments for our Tremont Street project, and any general facility, general obligation will come out of this fund. We have different debt service funds for each of our, what I'd say, enterprises. So our water utility will have its own debt service fund. Our sewers debt facility will have its own debt service fund, and so will storm. So this is just general governance. And in here, we've, as a city, have committed to pre-funding our debt. And so you'll start to see there will become balances in these funds as I transfer money from each of the operating funds to the debt service funds to pre-fund our debt service obligations coming up in the future. Again, 411 will be our water operating fund. You can see the budget, again, 92%, long way to go, early season. Again, you'll get used to tracking the percentages and where we're at in relation to the year. And if you have questions, you can always give me a call. Again, here's the structure as such. So you have your water operating, your water stabilization, again, our emergency reserve fund. And in this one, we actually had to make contributions because we added employees, we added cars, and then did the calculation. We were slightly behind where we need to be. So we budgeted. I usually time the transfer when I feel comfortable with where we're at in the year as far as revenues and expense activity. It's usually mid-year, usually when I'll make those transfers for stabilization, that I feel comfortable that we've made it through 6 months. We're on track healthy-wise from revenue and expense standpoint, that there's nothing that's going to surprise us that would tip us over that might make us pause this contribution. And then you have your water debt service fund. So same structure, operating, stabilization, debt service, and then capital will be on a little bit later on in the report. Your storm drainage fund, again, revenues and expenses. It's all set up the same way, your operating, stabilization, debt service, and capital will come later. And then sewer. So it follows all the same structure. And then our last fund I want to talk about is our ER&R, or again, our equipment rental revolving fund. This is the fund we budget and pay for all our equipment, our cop cars, our public works vehicles, our heavy machinery. The revenues going into this fund are actually payments from departments for their assets coming out of generally the general fund or the water fund, out of the operations fund to the ER fund to pay for their portion of their rental of their equipment. And then we actually make the capital purchases out of this fund.
Our goal is to, when that asset's wore out, that we've saved enough to buy its replacement. And it isn't always dollar for dollar because inflation is driving up the cost of everything.
Yeah, and that's a great point because we're gonna talk about that tonight. So the next report you see is the capital budget. Again, I think I still want to work on beefing up our capital budget section to make it more meaningful, but this is the budget. This is our fiscal activity. For me, when I look at this, it doesn't tell me a whole lot because I know we have a lot of capital projects. To really understand it, you really have to get into the detail. It's not as easy as looking at our just operations and saying we're doing well or not. In capital funds, in general, they go with the season of construction. So you'll see more expenses going out in the summer months. April is September, October, and then I'll kind of stop for a while. But at least you can see the activity. Then again, the cash investment report again. Okay, so I moved through that pretty fast, but did you have any other questions on that, John, before I move on?
No, I'm good. Thank you, Noah.
Okay. So those are the kind of financial reports and conversations we'll have. And then we'll generally go into topic specific presentations or discussions. So I'm gonna lead into our topic specific with our transportation 101, followed by TIP, ERR, and a right-of-way conversation.
Now, isn't this transportation funding going to be a presentation that's given to the full council next week?
Yeah, good
So
point,
this is
Mayor.
just a preview to the finance committee.
Yeah. So generally what I like to do is if I have the opportunity, run it by you guys first, get your guys' thoughts, input on the presentation and the material to see, hey, does it make sense? Are you tracking? Is this the right level for the full council and for the public? Before I can get another draft. So if you guys have comments, please share them and I'll try to incorporate to make it better for the full council as well as the public. So I don't think I'm gonna do this tonight because I see we're running short, but I did put a link in here. And Fred, you might be familiar with this one. This is a link from WASDOT that they do a little 2-minute video about city streets, you know. And again, I like the video because a lot of times people don't talk about how do we fund street preservation in cities. And so they kind of broke down some videos to kind of highlight good images and make it short and fun. So I would play it, but we're running short on time, so maybe I will at the study session if we're doing good. But for tonight, I really want to talk about our local transportation funding options first.
Are these gonna have percentages by them? Like what percentage of the total is contributed by each of these? Is it the six?
It's not really relevant because the transportation benefit district is a 10-year tax that we're collecting, and it's for a specific project and not going into other things within the city.
Yeah, I guess think about how you'd like to see it. Again, I think I was gearing towards concepts, high level. Okay. If someone didn't know, again, I'm treating everybody's new to the city, new to council. So how do local governments fund transportation? That's a general question that I get when I'm out and about. So these are what I've highlighted here are the 5 main revenue sources that we use in local government. So I just want to make sure that the council was familiar with this, at least could speak to it. At least when we're looking at reports, you can look for that. Some more vehicle fuel tax, again, is the gas tax in this state, where taxes are assessed on % per gallon basis. Again, I think a lot of people don't understand that it's not at the consumer level, but it's at the producer level. So when the state's working with our our fuel companies, they're only working with a handful. They're not actually taxing any individual person that comes to the pump. The reseller is passing that through in some form, but we're not actually taxing every individual in the state. So there are some efficiencies there in the tax collection cycle itself because of how we collect it. But each city is distributed a small portion based on per capita. And this is an important revenue source for us in our 002 fund. I should put that on there actually. 002 fund, that's our street operations fund. And so I highlighted here what was budgeted. So in 2023, we budgeted $285,000. We actually collected $302,000, so that's good. More than what we budgeted. And again, we use this money for pavement preservation, operations and maintenance, paving,
Fixing
lights,
potholes.
potholes.
Clearing vegetation along the roadway, operational things related to the streets.
So the next revenue source that we have here in the city is, I'm breaking this into two pieces. It's the transportation benefit district fee, which is a $20 car tax fee. I think most people are familiar with that. And then the tax, which we instituted almost a year ago. So again, every vehicle that is within the city boundaries pays the fee, the $20 fee. But the benefit of the tax, again, it captures all taxable sales within the district's boundaries, which doesn't necessarily mean it's an owner of a vehicle in the county or city. Could be someone like me passing through, coming to work, buying stuff. I would contribute to the tax piece as well. For the fee itself, we budgeted $225,000 in 2023. Again, collected $250,000 roughly. So again, positive. And then 2024, I think this number is wrong here, actually. I don't think that's the right
So is
one.
that really 120,000 cars or 1,200 cars? That's interesting.
And by policy, and that policy could change. When we imposed this, that we said we would put this to street preservation and maintenance, filling potholes, same activities that the gas tax is going towards to keep our streets in better condition.
Yeah, even strongly more, the legislation requires that we only use it for transportation. So I think that's always an important message that we tell people, like, yes, there's a TBD fee, but it's only for transportation. And there is a TBD sales tax, but it's only for transportation.
And then the prior council made a policy directive that it would not just transportation, but offer, the operation and maintenance aspect for the car tab piece, which is not true for the sales tax piece.
And I think it's interesting, you can guess how many cars we have in the city. 12,400. It's like, huh, so what if everyone added another car?
Well, you double your revenue.
Yeah.
But
And less parking.
I think what would be most interesting, so if you look at 2023 revenue, 248,000. Now I'm going to talk about the tax itself a little bit. So again, the council took action last year, tax on sales and everything in the jurisdiction boundaries. And it's 1/10 of 1%, which means if you buy something at the store for $10, we would collect a penny for the TBD sales tax. $100, 10 cents. So I think that was a powerful message that simplified really how much the tax they're paying for.
Did we collect a full year in 2023?
We did not. We
Okay,
did not collect a full year. I'd have to go look when that tax became effective.
it was in the first quarter, but not the full year.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and this is where I want to point out that when we set the tax, we had a target of $830,000 per year. Again, that's assuming a full year of collections. We did not hit that target. But for 2024, when we set the plan forward, we said we want to assume flat growth at a set amount that we think we can actually capture. So we have 830,000 as our target each fiscal year, hoping that there will be growth in the revenue source itself, but it won't set us up for total failure if it remains flat. And if you look at the $74,000 over 12 months, it would more than exceed our target. So it will be interesting and really telling in 2024 if this is a really good target figure and will we really achieve our goal over the 10-year period. Now, with the TBD sales tax, we targeted that one very specifically for a capital project for the Bethel Road Phase 1 project. And I put this graph up just to remind everybody how big this project is. And so I have all the descriptions here, Mayor. I don't know if you want to speak to this graph at all, the phases of the project, but I think this visual is really helpful. Because right now we're working on several phases of this project. And I didn't put up the whole work plan, but
Five is the pair of roundabouts. That one of the two will go to construction this summer. And then likely 2 years later is the second roundabout. The segment from 4 is from Lund back to Salmonberry, almost. And the phase 1 that this project fund is the pair of roundabouts and the complete street between the two from Salmonberry and Blueberry. And the revenue, the 110, we think it'll get us close. But until we get to an engineer, if a 90% design and engineer's estimate, we won't know if the 1/10 will be enough funding, whether we're gonna have to pursue grants. As Mark and Fred, you were around, and we hope not to have to go to we can do 1/10 councilmatically for a 10-year, it's 10 years, no?
yep.
And we can replace that if the legislation allows us to, it doesn't go away. To do 2 or 3/10, we have to go to the voters for additional revenue. So we're hopeful that this is get us close. We might have to put some traffic impact fees or other sources to this too. It just depends on how big the gap is, and we won't know that for a couple of years until this design is completed. Transportation is going to see 60% design at their meeting next week. I just recently saw it.
So again, I think this is helpful just as a reminder of why the council took the action they did. It's an important project in the city. You can see very clearly what section we're working on here is Bethel, Cinnamon, Blueberry design work, and then with anticipation of hopefully some future funding for construction. So that's the TBD sales tax. We got transportation impact fees. Again, these are impact fees on our one-time charges on developers to help pay and expand our public facilities and infrastructure that they directly have an impact on. We talked about this quite a bit as we have park impact fees, transportation impact fees. Again, this is a transportation review of revenue sources that are important to local government. So I've only focused on the transportation impact fees. And Nick and I will be bringing forward our annual transportation impact fee report here, hopefully within the next month or so. I'm just trying to finish up some numbers, and then we'll be able to share how much revenue we've received and how much money we've put towards our impact fee projects. Again, I identify capital projects because that's what it's restricted for. Do operation maintenance with this all big capital projects. You'll see in 23-24 we took big budgets, working with Nick's forecasting shop over there on building activity. We put $2 million each year in PIC as part of our budget. Now the good news is for 2023 we actually achieved our budget, so that's fantastic. And here we are 1 month in for 2024. So all positive signs. Just want to point out
That trend puts it to like 2.7.
But that is development. We know that's maybe changing.
the other revenue really important to all our capital projects really is REIT. And again, it's based on real estate excise tax, real estate activity. We have REIT 1, REIT 2. We call REIT 1 the first 25% or the first quarter. And I think REIT 1 is more restricted than REIT 2. So there's certain projects we can use REIT 1 for, but can't use REIT 2. So we budget appropriately and allocate funds appropriately to where we have the mixed need. You'll see for 2023, we budgeted $900,000 in REIT 1 and collected $1 million roughly. Again, since it's the same percentages, you'll see the same revenues for REIT 1 and REIT 2. Those will never differ. So good outcomes for 2023, 24. Only got 1 month on the books, but we already talked about it before, so we think we're in good shape as far as the percentage of our 2023 January REIT money and according to our budget. Again, we only use REIT for capital projects.
No, are you sure that number's right, that 53? Oh, yes, it is. It's,
Okay.
Yep, it is.
Okay.
What is, isn't this the one that comes in April and October? Or no?
No, we
It
get
comes in
monthly.
monthly, okay,
It's real estate, it's the tax on the sale of real estate,
okay,
not property
it's not the
tax.
property tax, okay.
So commercial, when apartment buildings and commercial buildings sell, we get huge upticks in REIT. Of course, homes selling contribute to it too, but commercial properties, we'll see spikes. Those happen.
We are under for 24.
Yes.
Yeah.
It fluctuates wildly just based on real estate sales.
So then the other sources of funding I wanted to highlight are our property tax. Again, for our 002 fund, we budget 35% of our property tax to go into that specific fund, which is our city street fund. And that's all that money's used for, is preservation and maintenance, pavements, street lighting, operations of our city street network. But that's a big percentage of our property tax on there. Other sources we use are sales tax. Those typically come in the form of one-time transfers from our general fund to the street fund to supplement and pay for and support our operation maintenance and preservation program in the need of. In the last few years, I think our sales tax transfers have been less than they were because we kind of got that fund had started accumulating some money finally. But each budget cycle, we'll go through with the public works and say, hey, what's the need? What's the funding do we have available? And do we need to actually prepare to move some of our general fund money? And I can't earmark it, the sales tax money to the street fund. Other funding sources are grants, and I'm not gonna go through all these because there's a lot of funding sources. And if you're part of the transportation committee, you will actually see those and hear those. But the state of Washington has some great programs with TIB and local programs, which we've got a lot of money from, as well as the federal programs that WASA does help us administer. So lots of grant programs through the state and federal funding to help fill the gap in our capital projects. Last two slides, I just wanted to kind of highlight 002. Here's more of a kind of what you were looking for, John, except for it's on a biennial basis, so it's gonna throw your brain off a little bit. But beginning fund balance, the revenue we budgeted for the biennial period, total expenses budgeted, and then what we expect to end the biennium with for 002 fund. Again, what we use the expenses for our roadway preservation work, concrete. Street lighting is actually very expensive to keep our street lights on and maintained, as you'll find out. Tractor control devices or street lights, prevent the safety. And then I put snow and ice because everybody wants to always ask if we are budgeting for snow and ice. And yes, we do budget money for snow and ice and safety measures.
I'm sure you get sponsorship for street.
The last slide I put on here is an updated reflection of our current street capital construction fund for the biennium. I have another presentation, but not for tonight. But you can see we do have a hefty transportation program in place this biennium. That includes design, right-of-way acquisitions, as well as construction projects, all in the next year of this roughly $14.7 million capital construction. Again, all these projects are then funded by all those funding sources we talked about, property tax, sales tax. Mainly, though, these projects are funded with impact fee money and the grants that we are receiving, and some rates. So I'm gonna leave out questions. So I want to give you guys kind of a high level overview of just transportation funding for local governments and then kind of stop there because I'm hoping that we can keep talking about this each month and kind of bring more detail if you want it. But I thought that was the right balance. So I guess this is where I'd look for some feedback from you guys of whether that's good and whether you have questions or comments.
I think it's a great overview. It raised questions, but I have topics that I think are standalone topics. For example, it made me wonder, for example, like what are the current costs for the 5 phases of Bethel? And that's
We
a
don't-
separate topic.
We don't know.
Or we don't know, okay.
Yeah.
70 million, I would guess.
And those
One more.
are gonna change.
Yeah, but what are they now? It's like, because the other question that I had is, I'm just wondering, and that's another topic would be like, what is our bonding capacity and how much of it have we used?
Yeah. No, these are great. As you kind of have these questions.
And I might just send that to Richard because those are topics I'm just curious
It's
about.
not probably for retreat, it would be for this.
Okay.
And we have more capacity than anybody,
Well,
and that any of us should be comfortable borrowing. Okay, we could borrow a lot of money, but what happens when we have an economic downturn?
well, that's why I think it might be a potential retreat topic, is like, okay, this is our credit limit in lay terms. But, you know, I would hate to spend to the top of my
Yeah.
credit limits.
And you would never want to borrow money for operation, you know, there's
Okay,
two,
it's capital.
there's two.
Yeah.
Two sources of money. There's our ongoing revenues and expenses and one-time revenues. And things that I view as one-time revenue, we overperform on the budget. And like last year, and we have $850,000. That's not ongoing revenue. We shouldn't pay for people and things that have ongoing costs. We shouldn't borrow money for things that have ongoing costs. Those are, you know,
We're in trouble if we do.
yeah, we have some really significant projects in Bethel Phase One, the pathway. That we don't have the engineer's estimates yet. We think we've got enough money, but we won't know till those designs are done. So those are things that you wanna have borrowing capacity, you know, available to you as a last source.
Yeah.
Of course, we wanna go get a grant that's free money. Or low interest loans from the state.
And, yeah, no, I think this is a good topic, and the reason for the retreat is that I just want to raise the question, like, okay, what is Bethel currently? Let's say it says 50 million, and we know it's gonna go up. Is there a point at which the council might decide, do we want to do some of our bonding to pay for Bethel now, because we know the price is gonna go up?
I
And
think
it's
We
really.
couldn't, Fred, we couldn't simply deliver on the project.
Well,
We
and
are,
that's,
we are,
I know, and that's
that's, we're in
another.
our capacity for
Yeah,
projects
and
right now.
that's another topic, but I'll email you what I'm thinking for a potential
Yeah.
topic, and
Okay,
I personally probably
Welcome.
don't want to spend anywhere near our capacity. It's just nice to know.
I'm gonna have some recommendations in that, is that I believe that, one, we need to deliver on Phase One. And we're gonna talk about it right away, it'll be in this right away discussion, because I think, and if we're gonna move forward on this. If there's 70 parcels in Bethel Phase One for a right of way agent. Okay, and I think if we're gonna hire, and that's gonna take that person, it's 2 years worth of work. Okay, for that one phase. And for,
so may I stop you guys, because this is a good conversation.
This is another topic.
Yes.
And I'm sorry for bringing
yeah,
it up,
and
but
it's gonna, and it's,
Yeah.
we're gonna come back to that.
Yes.
This is right here now on this agenda.
No, it's another topic.
And again, the plan the mayor laid out was that we want to try to get as many presentations in front of the council to educate, get a basic foundation about where we're at. So this is my first attempt to just revenue sources. And then Public Works is gonna come up with something for projects, just like Nick did last week on impacts and developer activity. So we're trying to build up the knowledge base of all the council members going into the retreat, so you guys can have this kind of more informed discussion amongst each other about kind of plans and thoughts. John, did you have a question?
No, I was just gonna say, I like the way this is mostly laid out. I don't know that I'd change anything yet. I think going through this monthly, we'll be able to start deciding if something needs to change, or if I'm not seeing a call out on a certain metric. But I think this looks great, and I would advise bringing this forward to council.
Yeah, right now, we don't know what we don't know, so this is a good
Yeah.
10,000 feet.
Yeah, and we wanna get you guys a good foundation, because when it needs to make sense is when we start developing the budget. And we start,
Yep.
you know,
Yeah.
I wanna do this, well, that comes out of the general fund, and then we don't have dollars there, but we have dollars over here.
Mhm.
So your top priority, or your top 3 priorities, we might might only be able to do 1 or 2 of them. But number 4 or number 5 might be coming out of a restricted fund that we're able to do, because it's a different pot of dollars. So we're trying to get you that foundation of the different colors of money and how it can be used in the different funds.
Okay, I'm gonna move on to the next topic. So again, that was just high level overview. Thank you for your feedback. If you have more, we have time for our next study session. And then I guess, I'll present to the full council and look for you guys also. A lot of times I look to the finance committee to, weigh in on some of this conversation that we have, share kind of things that you guys learned or understand. So it helps as a sounding board for me to understand if I'm communicating all the information correctly. So the next topic is.
Or an expenditure, and you guys have saw it at the finance committee, made a recommendation to bring it forward and approve this.
Yep. So the next topic is tip 1.15. It's Pottery project update. And the reason we're bringing this forward now, because I believe Public Works is bringing a contract forward either on the 27th or the following week. But again, we want to kind of get you guys up to speed with Pottery itself and the financing of it, so you guys can feel informed when that comes forward.
And remember, we talked about this a little bit in my mayor's report, that we have a funding gap. And then the question was asked about would it impact our street preservation program, and we have answers to that. And I sent you an email, but it didn't, but Noah's explanation is much more detailed.
So to kick this off, I wanted to give you guys the complete picture of what this, as we know of today, as you would say, right? What this project's going to cost. And it's roughly about $2.18 million in total. And that includes costs we've already incurred and what we're anticipating for our future costs. So I kind of want to run through this table to help you understand, so I think this is helpful. So as far as right-of-way consulting services, we had to hire a right-of-way agent to help acquire the property. We had a budget in this first far left column. You can see the activities that we've spent money on. Thus far, we've only spent money on the consulting services and some salary and benefits for design of the right-of-way, or not the right-of-way, excuse me, the project. But we do have some invoices in our city hall that we'll be processing next week for roughly $50,000 for purchases. So those are going to go through next week. So you see those expenses in this budget will shift. But you can see budget, actual activity, which we haven't done much yet, $80,000 worth, and then what we have remaining to spend to fulfill this project. Again, the big expenses are on the construction sidewalk and pavement work, Schedule A storm drainage and water main sewer. And we try to break the activity up based on the different enterprises because they can contribute to the project that way. Storm, while it's not a healthy fund, a lot of times we have to rely on the general fund to cover storm's portion. So just full disclosure, we haven't started collecting enough money in that fund or the impact fees for that. So historically, we've had to allocate general fund dollars to cover that of storm. Yeah, and that's totally appropriate from the transportation world. That's common. That transportation dollars are used to cover storm work.
And that sewer, that portion of that sewer, it is, we know that there's a lift station being built at Ruby Creek. And it needs a sewer line to get it all the way to the Cedar Heights lift station. It's in that parking lot. And so we, in this section, it's really bad government, in my opinion, to build a new road and not think about all the sewer and water lines that you need in the ground. And then 2 or 3 years later, come and cut that new road up. So
Happens all the time.
I know, well,
Unfortunately.
this administration tries not to do that. But you can't always prevent it. So this is laying the sewer force main in that segment of roadway so that we don't have to cut that road back up. And then we've got doing the same thing with water and some storm drainage activity too.
Good. So that's what you see on the top side is the expenditure of the budget. On the bottom side, I represent what we've had for revenue sources to date. Okay, and this is where we can then move into the next slide, which we this conversation of a budget amendment needed. But thus far, again, on the start on the far left, we have budgeted revenues and sources that we've used, what's available, and I identify cash or debt, and all this is cash right now, no debt, so that's good. And whether it's in the biennial budget, which it is, and the funding's available. So what this bottom chart tells you is that we have a grant from TIB for $650,000 towards this project. Again, we haven't used any of it because it's specifically for construction, and we haven't got to that phase yet, but the cash is available and we have it. We have impact fee money, which is budgeted, and we are using that $79,700, which is what we've been using to cover our expenses right now. So we've been using that impact fee money to cover the design and right-of-way expenses. So we still have $64,000 roughly available from the budget to pay for that. We do have some fund balance in 304. 304 has some good healthy fund balance from previous administrations, just making transfers over to build that fund up. And so when we built the budget, we said, hey, 40,000 fund balance can help to cover this. That works. again, we haven't spent any of it. So you'll see we haven't spent any of our fund balance, our water, or sewer. Again, these are all for construction phases, really. At this point, we've only been doing right of way and right of way purchases with some minimal design. So you can see we have 1.4 million of funding budgeted. We've spent some, we've used some of it, so we have 1.3 million available. So there is right now a gap between what we expect the project costs at 2.1 million and the sources we have available at 1.3. So on this next slide, that's all I'm really focusing on is what current sources do we have available? The $1.3 million. We know there's a gap of 753,000 to get to the 2.188 million. And so here is the proposal to cover the gap. I would bring forward, again, if the council goes forward with the project, I bring forward a budget amendment, which would contribute more general fund or street fund dollars to the capital construction fund of 136,000. We would increase our impact fee contribution to the max, which right now is about 416,000. Nick has told me I can do some additional contributions to TIF once we adjust for inflation, but I haven't done that yet. So a minimum would be 271,000. We might be able to tick that up a little bit more. Then for the water portion, again, water operations contributing to the water capital, another $137,000, and sewer contributing another $29,000. So these are the funding sources we would use to make up the $754,000 gap. You can see it's split. The biggest impact is really sewer and water and impact fees with a minor impact to the general fund.
And correct me if I'm wrong, that was savings from paving off, it's in our street fund. We are paving projects this last summer. The bids were lower than we expected, and so we had savings. So the question Jay asked at the last council meeting, if we put this $136,000 to this project, would it impact our paving, what we plan for paving or maintenance this next repairs and maintenance this next year? And the answer is no, because we're bringing forward savings that we had from this last year's paving operations that came in lower than expected. Make sense?
Does that eat up the entire amount of those savings, or is it a little bit of stuff left?
Pretty close.
Pretty close.
I think that looks good. And the question, which may not be able to be answered, is like, what will we not be able to fund if we go to these balances?
Nothing. Those are in fund balances.
Okay, so it's not
So-
like anything else that's waiting, or?
Correct. Yeah.
No, I might suggest if you bring this to full council, in between the budget amendment column and the new project budget column, inserting what those fund balances are currently, right? Each one of these funds, we know what we're trying to adjust them by, but it might help council knowing that there's still a good, healthy balance in those funds.
Millions.
Okay.
Especially with new people.
Yeah, I mean, these are all good comments because we do have, we haven't completed our 23 report out and how well we did, but when I look at our December report, if you get a chance to go back and look at that, we actually did end very well in our operations funds for water, sewer, and we do have big balances in our transportation impact fee fund, which really, for the impact fee fund, it's more about the priorities of that fund. What is it that we are trying to complete as far as transportation projects? And committing the full max we can means that we see that this project is a high priority.
Because the project that our communities have been asking for is the safety improvements for the kids in front of that middle school. We're gonna add, better lighting. We're gonna add the high intensity flashing crosswalks. So you get crosswalk improvements, the road gets put on a diet, so it's no longer a passing zone.
I think our senior centers will also be very happy.
Yeah.
To see something like this happen.
Yeah, also the seniors, then we got the seniors on one side of the street and the kids on the other side of the street, and it just makes it a much more inviting pedestrian environment than it is currently.
Dennis, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but do you know when Chris or yourself is planning on bringing that forward?
It's the next meeting, next Tuesday night.
The 27th.
Right.
Okay, so this is a prime example of what we like to do is get in front of the finance committee, talk about the project, kind of get your questions so we can address this. That way, when Dennis goes before the full council next week, you guys feel prepared to either speak for it or you can raise your questions with us now. We can kind of prepare you as well as us for what questions might come forward. Sure.
So Mark as the chair, you saw what John Clausen typically did. We saw it last week, we saw this at the finance committee. Noah gave us a presentation on it and we're in support of the finance committee's support of the project.
Gotcha. So I guess that would be the question I would ask is, does the finance committee want to support this project or leave it for the full council for discussion? How would you like to handle it?
My personal support.
You're casting your vote next week. It's just
Right.
whether or not the
Yeah,
committee
I
supports.
think it would go to council, and I think it with our recommendation, probably with our recommendation. It's very reassuring to me to know that we're not spending money that is going to rob another project.
Not at all.
So.
John, you comfortable with
What
that?
say you?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Okay, moving on. Okay, next one. This hopefully will be short so we can get to the right of way conversation. ER&R, our Fund 500. I think the mayor started to talk about this, but when we put together a budget, we do it based on the best information we have on the cost of vehicles and trucks at that time. What we find is those costs tend to go up during our biennial period. So for the police department in particular, they originally budgeted to purchase 9 vehicles for a cost of $603,000. When we did mid-biennial review, we added 2 additional officers, one on patrol and one as a deputy, and we had to equip those officers. And so we budgeted 2 additional vehicles for a total budget of $745,000. So that's 11 vehicles, $745,000. Those vehicles have been on order since the last biennium, I think, or the start, I would say the start of 2023. We've had these vehicles on order, the 9 at least. And then after we approved the 2 additional officers and 2 vehicles, the manufacturer called and let the chief know that they actually received a canceled order of 2 additional vehicles and wanted to know if the chief wanted them. And so the chief immediately jumped on that, said, yes, I want these vehicles, because our lag time is at least 18 months from when we place an order to get the vehicle. So he jumped on and said, yes, I'd like the vehicles. So that's where we're sitting with the vehicles purchase. He's going to be bringing that forward, I believe, next Tuesday, authorization to complete the purchase of the 11 vehicles. But the reason we're bringing it here is that when we looked at the updated costs and quotes, it's now roughly $50,000. And so that leaves us with a current budget shortfall of $100,000 in our ER fund. And so to solve this issue, here's what I'm proposing. Again, we talked about the criminal justice fund just a little bit earlier, how we only use that fund to fund police vehicles and equipment. And when I looked at 2023 compared to budgeted revenue of $391,000 to our actual revenues received of $485,000, we had a surplus, if you will, of $95,000 of revenue over our budget. So I'd like to use the additional surplus of revenue, $95,000. And then when I looked at ending fund balance for 2024, we budgeted to end the fund with $155,000. So I propose we use about $10,000 of our ending fund balance to complete the whole acquisition of $105,000 of additional need. So I want to run that by you first to see if you feel comfortable with that approach or if you have questions.
My only question is, how did the chief expect to cover the difference? Or was
That's not what he does. That's what
Okay.
we do.
Sorry?
So no,
So
you think it's wiser to completely empty this account, 103? Than to leave a little balance in there?
Yeah, and that's a good question. So what he said, John, is does the 94,000 represent completely bringing that fund down to a 0 balance for 2023? And actually it doesn't. If you look at the fund
Summary.
on the summary sheet, the revenues and expenses, they actually had savings on expenses as well. So there is some additional capacity there. I'm just proposing the additional revenue be used. And then, it's really an accounting thing to adjust our ending fund balance by 10,000 to make up the difference going into 2024, knowing we have some expense savings going into 2024.
Remember from our earlier presentation too, that this criminal justice fund can only be used for these types of expenditures. So it's restricted dollars.
Yeah.
That can only be used in this
And
manner.
it has a healthy balance.
It has money. So John,
Yeah, no, are these all replacement vehicles or add vehicles?
9 are replacement and 2 are add, I believe, because we added 2 police officers in this last
So-
budget, so they needed.
Okay. So what are we doing with the other 9 vehicles that we have today?
They get surplus or they're worn out. We will cherry pick a couple after the mechanic goes through them, and they'll end up in code enforcement or administrative vehicles. We won't typically, the mechanic drives an old police car. So we find homes for them where appropriate, but we don't, something that the transmission's about to go out in, or they're gonna have a big repair, we get rid of them. Because
Yeah, so that's what I'm asking. Can we cover that $10,000? Can we sell some? Are we gonna see a profit in selling these?
we've got an
Yeah.
auction site that, online auction site that we dispose of all of our assets on.
Yeah, so that's a great question. From a practical standpoint, yes, we are going to get some money from surplusing or selling these vehicles off that we would put back into the police budget. Generally, just communicating to the public, it's easier to stick to a certain thing like fund balance, that it's very budgeted, very clear. It's easier to say, yeah, I know I have 55,000 of budgeted any fund balance that I can use, rather than speculate and say, I might get 1,000 here, 1,000 here, and piecemeal this thing together. But you are absolutely correct.
Okay.
Any money we receive from the sale of the vehicle will go back into the fund for the police, which we can then use for future purchases as well.
Thank you.
So all 11 of these new rigs will be in the field.
Yes.
We don't have a holdback for an issue.
We have spare vehicles in our pool, but the new vehicles go out on the street.
Yeah, with the completion of these 11 vehicles, we will have, I believe, 5 surplus police vehicles, which we kind of hold back in case the accidents happen. We keep a vehicle at the shop in case they come in for repairs and need a vehicle, they drop one off, pick one up. So we do have, for the police fleet support. Yeah, they're not running bare minimum. And right now, again, that assumes that our police department would be fully employed. But we do have vacancies in the police department that they're constantly trying to fill. So even though we have, 30 vehicles, they only have 22 employees. But in an ideal world, they would have their full employees, and we would have additional 5 vehicles as surplus kind of vehicles in rotation.
And we're getting close to full employment. I think we got about offers out that would fill everything, but we have 2 retirements coming this year too, so it's a constant.
I guess another question would be.
Yeah,
when
I'd say,
When we get to that full employment position, are we gonna need more?
No.
units,
This
Or
is,
are we good to go for
Yeah.
3 to 5?
I can assure you, the next biennial budget will have some, not as many as this. We're constantly evaluating, everything's got a lifespan, and we replace them.
Or if the council adds police officers.
Yeah.
You gotta provide them equipment, right? So, yeah, we budget and assume full employment. What do they need to do their jobs? That's how we operate.
John?
I was just say, I'm comfortable with moving forward with this plan. I say bring that forward.
Yeah, I think you've anticipated any concerns I would have had.
Okay, and I think the chief's bringing that forward next week, so he'll speak to it. If you have
And I
any
think he made the right decision.
Okay, so I'm gonna turn this over to Rob or Nick. I'm not sure who wants to speak to this. Nick, do you want to start?
It's up to the mayor.
Well, Nick, why don't you give some background, and then I'll dive into some of the details. I know that you got a proposal here for one,
Yeah.
One piece of right of way so one piece of right of way, on Sedgwick we want to acquire. The consulting fee for that is $30,000. consultant's fee. And I gave you a number earlier, what's going on Bethel. We would be the only city, if we, I think this is the right decision, but we want to talk to you guys about this, to hire our own right-of-way agent. The county employs two. There isn't another city in the county that employs their own right-of-way agent. But as you're aware, we've got tons of capital projects. Nobody has the number of capital projects we've got going on either. And this is the biggest choke point we're experiencing in the pathway. And also, I see it coming to fruition on Bethel Phase 1 and future phases of Bethel. So I would rather control our own destiny and our process. And we've been having missteps with consultants, doing things they shouldn't do, and which is unfortunate. So I'm gonna let Nick take it away from there.
Can I ask
Go ahead.
I was just gonna ask a quick question because I read a lot of this ahead of time. Back to kind of what the mayor was saying, without and when you said no other municipality has their own right of way.
In Kitsap.
In Kitsap, yes. No, what do you anticipate, Nick, that we would be able to offer services to other municipalities if we're not keeping our person busy 100% of the time?
I think we're going to keep our person busy.
Okay, good. Okay.
I don't think it is our intent to hire this person and then farm them out to other cities.
Okay.
We have enough work.
Okay.
But
So-
it's a good question, though.
We have an ILA with the county. They just don't have, their two people are busy and don't have.
Well, they'd be busier than we would be ready.
And just to, Fred's question earlier about Bethel. If we hire this person, I think the council needs to make a conscious decision. We need a 60% design to get to the right-of-way phase, okay? I think that we need to make, if we're gonna go down this path, we can't hire somebody for 2 years worth of work on Bethel Phase 1 and then lay somebody off. I don't think that would, and there's other things this person could do. I think we need to make a decision that Bethel, all of it is a priority, and that we're gonna fund the design, find a way to fund the design, and then to a 60% at least, and then put this person to work acquiring all of the right of way. And then we figure out how to fund the other pieces from a construction standpoint. So Nick?
So Dennis and I both had the same idea, and I had talked to the mayor about this 1.5 years ago, saying, I think this is something we should explore. It was the middle of our current budget, and so it didn't progress any further. And then Dennis got here and said, we really need our own right-of-way agent. And I said, all right, finally somebody agrees. When you look at the Bethel corridor plan, we have when we did the corridor plan, I'm going to share my screen here. This is the right-of-way exhibit that we did for all of Sedgwick and Bethel. And it includes, I believe, 44 properties for Bethel Phase 1, and it's over 100 properties in total where we're going to need to acquire right-of-way. And the blue is a slope easement, whereas the red is actual right-of-way acquisition. And this is not a 60% design, but for some of the properties here, we need a 60% design if there's radiuses involved. I think for the mid sections where you're just dealing with a corridor and acquiring extra width that is parallel to the existing right-of-way, it's a little bit easier for somebody to start working on this. And just for your information, the property that we need to acquire on Sedgwick, this square that says Gilmore actually extends all the way across the highway. And so this property prevents Multicare wants to come in here with this hospital. And because they don't control the right-of-way, they can't actually put in the turn lanes or the frontage improvements that we require of new development. And so the $35,000 task order that we have from our on-call consultant is just for this one little triangle dealing with one property owner. And so with 144 properties, even if they were only closing one property a month, you can see that the cost per property to have a consultant do this is quite high. I think the other areas where this person makes sense, we have development agreements for sewer lift stations and frontage improvements on a variety of projects, and we're frequently receiving deeds that have to be reviewed. They have to be taken to council for acceptance. We have to calculate impact fee credits. There are sewer easements that we receive, all kinds of real estate instruments that this person could assist us with that we're currently sending to our attorney to work on. We have purchase and sale agreements from time to time that this person could be kind of spearheading the transaction for the city. Currently, the mayor and the attorney get together and write agreements. I would envision this person being able to draft the agreement for attorney review rather than spending quite as much time on the attorney. We have street vacations. The clerk is currently dealing with a big one from Kitsap County with several different pieces of right of way. So this provides the clerk with some relief. Dennis and I also talked, our parks plan identifies that we need to acquire future parks for growth in different parts of the city where we don't have parks. And so as we get grants to do park projects, this person can continue that sort of work. But I don't see any shortage of work for the next 10 years for a position of this type. And I think 1 to 2 properties a month is probably a realistic pace for this person. And some months may be better than that, where you have property owners that agree. But if you're going through condemnation, it takes much longer.
That's our wild idea.
One
We
to
haven't
two
figured
per
out.
month, that's all. 1 to 2 per month.
Well, you gotta meet with people, tell them what we're doing, what are the
We
impacts
need
of my
like 5
property?
right of way agents.
So Nick, can we assume that we'd also have a little bit smoother communication line between the city and the property owners? If we were to look at doing something along this line?
Perhaps I think that there is a process that you follow, and Dennis and I have both had to get certified as right-of-way agents so that we can supervise this process and supervise our consultants. But there are certain things that you can and can't do when you're dealing with somebody when you're acquiring property. And so it's important that you follow these steps. And so some people want more information than we're able to give them. And so we can't fix that. But I think that in terms of not having your attention divided between multiple clients in multiple cities, this person is going to have much more focus in terms of starting and finishing individual acquisition projects.
And just I wanna set clear expectations here. When the pathway or the other roundabout that are federal money, the rules are 10 times more restrictive than state funding. And so, state money, we would still, in all instances, when we're dealing with federal money, use an outside consultant. Because you make a mistake in federal funding, you get to pay it back.
Well, and that's I guess that wasn't really the intent. I think that we do not want to open a federal project that is midway through the process and assign it to some new staff person. So
Yeah.
for the projects that are underway, we absolutely want to continue using our right-of-way consultant. But the idea here is that this person would follow that federal process so that if we acquire things now and get federal money later, we didn't violate the federal rules in acquiring the property. We followed the process and followed all of the steps and have the documented file of how we paid for something, because that can prevent us from getting federal money in the future, because they look back at every piece of right of way that you have. How did you acquire it? And did you follow the federal rules?
And I'm not certain we don't intend to federalize Bethel. And there are different levels of certification, because I've talked to the folks at the county. And one of their agents has the federal certifications and the other one doesn't. I'm not certain that we're gonna be able to attract somebody of the higher certification, but we have plenty of work. The street vacations, Bethel Phase 1 for sure, and not to say that we hire somebody and that we grow them and they get those additional certifications, but I'm not certain that we will get somebody out of the gate that has those we would advertise for it and be willing to pay more for it, but I'm not certain what the market out there is right now.
The other thing that the person could do is we have a number of surplus properties. I think there's 11 or 12 properties that we have asked the clerk's office to try to dispose of. And our clerks just don't have the bandwidth to handle that process. And so for years, we've had these things available that we'd like to get rid of if we have time, and we just don't have time to do it. So that is another task that this person could do that would also potentially bring in some revenue.
Or we have a clerk's department of 2 and real estate, we're pounding a square peg into a round hole when there's street vacation. They do it and they do an excellent job, but they don't have a capacity to do these other activities. What are your thoughts?
It sounds like we're past due.
Yeah, it makes
Really
sense. I guess the concern is how are you gonna pay for it?
That's the next step. If you guys are supportive of the ideas for us to figure that out.
So what have we've been
So-
spending on consultants for the last year and a half? I mean, we got 36,000 on a small little triangle chunk
I-
already.
And I was just going to suggest, Mark, because I think in that memorandum that the NOAA had sent out prior to the meeting, kind of spelled that all out, right? It spelled out what we spent on it both last year for Tierra and Common Street, and then it looks at some of the pipelines. I know Bethel Sedgwick shows it's got 133,000. I think if you could create some kind of graphic in that, and or kind of project some of the other right of way, right? The rest of that memorandum didn't have dollar amounts attached to that. I would just, if we could even guesstimate what those would look like so that we can show the rest of council, hey, this is what this would potentially cost, and we can subsidize that or not have to pay that out because
I
we're
think
paying
we've
a
got-
salary instead.
Don't we have a scope in the contract with, is it Skillings? Who's doing Bethel Phase 1, Dennis?
Bethel had the
That's with
133,000.
FCJ. Yeah, so for those 44 properties, I mean, there are economies of scale when you're doing multiple properties at the same time. But I believe it was 133,000.
133,000. Yep.
And they have not started yet. And so the thought was we could take that away from the consultant and give it to the person that we would hire.
Correct. I think if you do that and then we look at trying to assign some kind of dollar amount to the rest of those projects down that list on that memorandum, I think it's a no-brainer, and I would move forward with that.
Agreed.
Do we want to make this part of next year's budget, or is it something if we can find money to do it, that we move ahead prior to that?
I'd say as soon as possible. I still don't know that 1 is enough.
Well, we gotta start somewhere.
Gotta start somewhere.
Well, and I might ask the fellas here, Nick and Dennis, how hard do you think it's going to be to find somebody? That would be the answer to the question for the mayor, because if it's going to take 6 months to find somebody, I don't want to wait and bring this up for the budget. Let's get moving.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not certain we're going to find someone, even if we advertise it. So we may get applicants, but I don't know that we're going to get experienced applicants, which is what we need for this position.
But we've got to get started on it. I mean, whether it's in this budget or next budget, if we have somebody that is interested in the near future, if it's not on a budget item, then we can't do it. So I think we should just move ahead with it and take the leap and make it happen.
So it sounds like at the very least, it would make sense that either Nick or Dennis bring this forward to the next full council study session to get full council buy-in. And it sounds like the finance committee is supportive of this and a little bit more work on how to fund it.
So you want to bring that add that to the March work study? We've only got one item, which is the pathway presentation.
Yeah, I think that'd be a good addition.
I'd say bring it to next week if you can.
Oh, so do we need to have HR look at salaries and costs for the
Yes.
position yet?
Yes,
So that'll take some time to research, I think, and
we'll be lucky to get it to you in March.
Okay.
We're all in the middle of moving. We'll ask that question for Debbie, and she'll let me know. I mean, we've just recruited and are onboarding a ton of employees right now. So
See, maybe you can find someone from another agency.
I'm not gonna speak to this on a recording.
There's anything else. So that is everything that we had on the agenda for tonight. Sorry, this went way longer than it was supposed to. But it was our first meeting kickoff. We had to cover some kind of just basic committee stuff, and then we did have some meaty presentations. So hopefully it was valuable and useful. And again, I look for support and guidance from this committee, and whether it's the right message, communicate the right way as we kind of
This
go
is
forward.
very helpful, the fun summary sheet, I found helpful.
If there's nothing else, then I would turn to the chair to call the meeting to adjourn.
Well, I think this first meeting for the finance committee in 2024, what is it, February 20th, is adjourned. How's that?
Thank you.